Well, hello there. Welcome to another J&J Tabletop video. My name is Jake, and with me, as always, is Josh. Josh, we've got a new Dungeon Master's Guide for the 2024 Rules Update, and we're going to talk about the changes to building encounters. That is one of the biggest criticisms, I think, of all of 2014 5th edition. I think that's very safe to say, actually. Before we dive into this, we really haven't looked into much of what most people are saying about this. So if you'd like to keep us informed in the comment section, please feel free to do that. Josh, what's the same here when it comes to the guidelines they're giving us for building encounters?
The big thing that's the same is the foundation, right? The bones of it is it's an XP budget. You have a little worksheet, tells you how much XP per character. That's the thing that's the same, that very small baseline. But then it immediately gets different in that the budget values kind of change. In 2014, you had 4 columns. You had easy, medium, hard, and deadly. In the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, you have low, medium, and high. That's kind of weird language, in my opinion, but they took out easy, which I think is fine. As far as the values, though, values are the same up until around levels like 6 through 9. They start to get a
Nice.
little bump. Yeah. They start to get a bump, and I think that's welcomed.
Yeah, that's when your characters are getting extra attack. They're starting to get spells like Fireball and Haste and Slow and all these kinds of things that could really start to have a pretty big impact on how monsters are going to perform, how they perform, the whole thing. But the biggest change, I think, is that there's no multiplier for number of monsters in the encounter. And obviously, for new dungeon masters, people that are just looking at these things for the first time, that's going to be a very good thing. But we made a video about this, making encounters, probably about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. And I kind of just say, was that not something you were already ignoring? Because I think that was easily something where you had to kind of throw away. I mean, it's not something you ignore completely, but that's going to help a lot of new dungeon masters that need to be told that and not just kind of get so stuck in the bowling alley lane where they put the bumpers up and they're like, I have to live here. I need my training wheels. This is good. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, they also got rid of the encounters per day, kind of replaced it with a conversation about like short rests and stringing together encounters and urgency and that kind of stuff. I don't know. How do you feel about the encounters per day kind of thing?
Not every encounter is built the same, right? Like the old version used to do kind of like 6 to 8 encounters per day, but that was like a medium or hard difficulty. And I kind of think unless you're going like insanely, like we're just trying to crush the players every time, I think probably maxing out at 5 would be generally a good spot to start. A little less if you're going against low level parties. I like that they had a daily budget. It kind of gave you just some numbers to work with. A lot of times the math, the math ain't mathin' or the math is mathin'. So it just helps people kind of have at least a guideline. And it's always a guideline with these sorts of things because not every party's the same. Not all the monsters are the same, even if they have the same number assigned to their budget.
Hopefully you don't have to be told this. No disrespect to you, but you, the viewer. But Jake just said, not all parties are the same. Your players who want to create the highest damage output, fighter, warlock, whatever, multi-class, and just really crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
They have completely different needs than your theater kids who want to tell a fun story. And there's nothing wrong with either
true.
game as long as you're on the same page. That's really what matters. But no XP table is going to be prepared for either of those extremes. It's meant kind of for somewhere in the middle.
Something I kind of just came up with sort of off the top of my head is if instead of looking at maybe like a daily experience value, you could look at it and say like, okay, I've got 10 points to spend per day. A low difficulty is 1, a medium difficulty is 2, and a high difficulty is 3. Go ahead, spend your 10 points however you want. I don't know. Let me know if you use that. Let me know how that works. I'd be curious.
I think one other thing that I would say is different is there's more of an emphasis on this entire section in really like building an encounter as a whole. There's full paragraphs on monster behavior, building urgency or removing urgency, short rests, when to take them, and the effects that they have both on the player characters, like stat wise, as well as how that affects like just the flow of your adventuring day.
And warlocks.
Yeah, right. As well as like random encounters and some other stuff in there too. Overall, and we kind of just mentioned this, the numbers might not be perfect, and really they never will be perfect. But as a whole, I think it feels like more of a complete guide than the 2014 DMG, whereas the 2014 DMG was good, but I think it was more like more ideas thrown on a page, whereas this is more fleshed out. Hey, these are things you could do. This is what it looks like. Here's the whole rundown.
All right, so we know what's the same. We know what's different. Josh, what is it missing? Or at least what do we feel like it's missing?
Probably a bunch, but the thing that comes to mind is some sort of modifier for like environmental difficulties. If you're going to use those experience thresholds as a budget for encounter building and base everything around that, then I think hazards probably should have some sort of budget value, or there should be at least some mechanical conversation on the effect that has on these numbers. For old timers like us, we look at this and it's a good starting place, but you kind of know what you need to do without looking at the table. But for new players, they might not realize the effect that like cover or surprise or any number of conditions could have on a combat.
Yeah, I think my advice to anyone that's thinking about that would be use this sort of as like a tiebreaker or like a filling in the gap sort of a thing, right? If you're putting an encounter together and you just keep coming up a few hundred experience short, well, maybe give them better defensive cover or some kind of way to enhance their offensive capabilities, whether that's if you use flanking rules or whatever there might be. Maybe there's like some kind of like a bless fountain that they're just spraying bless on them. I don't know, whatever it is. It's something that could just help do that. Like we recently had an encounter where you ran where the entire party was poisoned for the fight. That had a big impact. It might have been nice to say, hey, guess what? This is worth X amount on the group. If we move into the evaluation, like overall, I kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but like this is definitely something that needed to be cleaned up. And I think overall, I would give it like a B+ or an A-. I feel like this is a great starting point now for new dungeon masters. A lot of the core principles of encounter building still exist. You have to use this as your baseline, and then if they're getting their butts kicked, ease up a little bit. If they're just mauling it, obviously you're going to tune things up a little bit. But I do have to say, for the vast majority of dungeon masters, a lot of this is probably going to be things they were doing already. But Josh, what did you think about things?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you just mentioned with one big asterisk, right? I don't know how many real videos I've talked about this in. I know if you were unfortunate enough to watch the like insanely long live stream we did with Lee the week before the Player's Handbook
Saying
came
goodbye
out.
to 5e. Yeah.
I think I went into this, but it's really, really tough to judge this without a new monster manual to cross-check things against. And I feel that way about the Player's Handbook too, but especially when we're talking about building an encounter, you know, there's some clear changes that I think are good, but when I'm looking at this list, I'm looking at the 2014 list. This list, it can't possibly be accurate unless across the board the new monsters are more powerful. When I look at the 2014 experience guidelines, 2014 doesn't include magic items and it doesn't include feats when they're looking at these experience thresholds. I don't know if 2024 accounts for magic items. I would assume no. I don't think you really can. But it does include feats. Feats are no longer an optional rule. They were in 2014. So PCs are inherently more powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And these numbers, like we said, are very similar until you get a little further down the line. And that's not even, I'm talking about feats. I'm not even talking about like weapon masteries and that kind of stuff. So there's a very long-winded way of saying, I think we're headed in the right direction. I think it looks pretty good, but the monsters need to be more powerful for this to make sense. And we'll see. I don't know. We have to wait another 3 months.
Oof. Yeah, it's in February, I think. But we want to know what you think about these changes. Have you seen the new Dungeon Master's Guide yet? Have you looked at it? Let us know in the comment section. How do you feel about this? Do you feel more or less comfortable building encounters by the book? And also, you could check out the video we have on screen now talking about challenge rating system tips that still apply today. So thank you so much for watching. Take care, everyone, and have good fun in your games.